Michael Sullivan stood tall despite his limp. A 58-year-old retired Army Ranger with weathered skin and vigilant eyes. By his side, Shadow, a German shepherd with graying muzzle and intelligent gaze, wore a vest clearly marked Service Dog. Do not distract. Michael had served 22 years in the Army's elite Ranger Regiment before a sniper's bullet in Mosul ended his active duty career. The physical wounds had healed, but the invisible scars of PTSD remained, bringing unpredictable anxiety attacks that could paralyze him in public. For the past 6 years, Shadow had been his constant companion. The German shepherd wasn't just a service animal. He was a fellow soldier, trained to detect subtle changes in Michael's breathing and heart rate. Shadow would apply gentle pressure against his leg when sensing an impending episode. These small interventions prevented countless public incidents that would have left Michael embarrassed and isolated. Their morning routine never varied. A walk at dawn, medication for both of them. Shadow's hip carried shrapnel from the same attack that injured Michael, and their usual stop at the Veterans Center where Michael volunteered twice weekly. Shadow's presence allowed Michael to navigate crowded spaces and maintain a semblance of normalcy, despite the war that occasionally still raged in his mind. Today was supposed to be a celebration, the anniversary of their unit's return home. Michael had promised Shadow a proper steak dinner, a rare treat for both of them. The Oakwood Steakhouse was known for its prime cuts and rustic atmosphere. When Michael entered with Shadow padding silently beside him, the hostess smiled warmly and led them to a quiet corner table away from the busiest sections. Shadow settled invisibly beneath the table, perfectly positioned between Michael's boots. A young waitress approached with menus and water, her smile genuine as she took Michael's order. The restaurant hummed with lunchtime conversations and the clink of silverware, a peaceful scene that was about to shatter. The disruption began when a man in his 40s with manager's badge emerged from the back office, eyeing Shadow with immediate disapproval. He marched directly to Michael's table, his face hardening with each step. "Sir," he said loudly, slapping his hand on the table hard enough to make nearby diners turn. "Pets are absolutely not allowed in this establishment. Health code violations could shut us down." Michael remained calm, his voice steady. "He's not a pet. Shadow is a registered service animal." He reached for the documentation in his pocket. The manager waved it away without glancing at it. "I don't care what paper you have. No dogs means no dogs." From a nearby table, a man in an expensive suit with a flashy watch smirked. "Some people think the rules don't apply to them," he commented to his dining companion, intentionally loud enough for Michael to hear. The manager crossed his arms. "Either the dog goes or you both go. I'll call security if necessary." The restaurant had gone quiet. Other diners pretended to focus on their meals while stealing glances at the confrontation. Shadow remained perfectly still, trained not to react to tension, in his handler's voice. Michael slowly stood, his dignity intact despite the public humiliation. "This dog saved my life and the lives of my team in Iraq. I won't leave him outside." "Then you know where the door is," the manager replied coldly, gesturing toward the exit. With military precision, Michael and Shadow moved toward the door, feeling the weight of curious stares against their backs. Outside the restaurant, the bright sunlight felt harsh against Michael's face. His jaw clenched as he paused on the sidewalk, taking measured breaths the way his therapist had taught him. Shadow pressed lightly against his leg, sensing the rising anxiety. A group of college students lounged at the outdoor seating area of a nearby coffee shop. One nudged his friends as Michael passed. "Check it out. Grandpa and his emotional support pet got the boot." He snickered, holding up his phone to record. "Probably thinks his fur missile is Delta Force or something." "My roommate has an emotional support hamster," another joked. "Maybe it needs a little tactical vest too." Michael heard every word but kept walking. He'd faced insurgents in Fallujah. These smartphone warriors weren't worth his attention. Still, each word stung like salt in an old wound. He found a bench in the small park across from the restaurant, settling down with a clear view of the entrance. From his jacket pocket, he produced a sandwich he bought earlier from a deli. "Not the ribeye, I promise you, buddy," he murmured, breaking off a piece for Shadow. The dog accepted it gently, eating with the disciplined restraint of a working animal, eyes constantly returning to Michael's face for cues. Michael's hand drifted to his pocket, fingers tracing the outline of a worn photograph he always carried. It showed a younger Michael on a stretcher, blood-soaked bandages visible, with Shadow standing guard beside him. The dog's tactical vest was dusty and stained with what might have been his handler's blood. Around Shadow's neck hung the distinctive tags of Echo Team, 75th Ranger Regiment. "Some things never change, do they?" Michael whispered. Shadow's ears perked up, alert and loyal as ever. The memory came uninvited, as vivid as the day it happened. Mosul, 2007. Their unit had been clearing buildings when the sniper's first shot rang out, dropping their point man. Before anyone could react, a second shot caught Michael in the thigh, the impact spinning him into the open street. Exposed and bleeding, Michael had been a perfect target for the follow-up shot. That's when Shadow broke protocol, darting from cover without command. The German Shepherd had seized Michael's tactical vest in his teeth, dragging him behind a bombed-out car as bullets kicked up dust around them. Shadow had stayed positioned between Michael and the sniper's nest, his body a shield, while the team's medic worked to stop the bleeding. When a third shot came, Shadow had taken the shrapnel that was meant for medic, never whimpering or leaving his post. Hours later, during evacuation, the helicopter crew had initially refused to allow the wounded dog aboard with the human casualties. Major Hayes and a captain had drawn his sidearm, informing the pilot that Shadow was a soldier who would be evacuated with the same priority as any other wounded ranger. The Army had awarded Shadow the K-9 Medal of Courage. Michael had received a Purple Heart. The bond forged in blood had never weakened. Back on the park bench, Michael blinked away the memory. A young mother hurried her curious child along, whispering warnings about approaching strange men with dogs. Michael pretended not to notice, having grown accustomed to being viewed as something between a curiosity and a threat in civilian society that claimed to honor veterans but often failed to understand them. "Almost time for your medication," he told Shadow, checking his watch. Back at the Oakwood Steakhouse, the lunch crowd had thinned somewhat when the front door swung open with decisive force. 5 men in Army dress uniforms entered with military precision, their Ranger tabs visible on their shoulders. They moved as a unit, not glancing at the menu or available tables, proceeding directly to the host station. Conversations quieted as diners noticed the uniforms. A businessman lowered his phone mid-call. A child pointed, eyes wide with curiosity. The sudden silence felt heavy, expectant. The ranger in front, a major with the name Hayes on his uniform, approached the counter and placed his service ID down with deliberate care. "I'm Major Robert Hayes, commander of Echo Team, 75th Ranger Regiment. I'm looking for Master Sergeant Michael Sullivan and his service dog Shadow," he stated, his voice carrying throughout the now silent restaurant. The manager emerged from the back office, his confident demeanor faltering at the sight of the uniformed men. They left," he stammered, suddenly conscious of the numerous phones now recording the interaction. "About an hour ago." Major Hayes' expression remained perfectly controlled, but his voice took on an edge that made several diners shift uncomfortably in their seats. "Master Sergeant Sullivan led the rescue operation that saved my life and 3 other Rangers during a sniper ambush in Mosul. His service dog Shadow has more confirmed saves than many combat medics." He paused, letting the information settle over the silent restaurant. "Shadow holds the honorary rank of sergeant in our unit and has been awarded the K-9 Medal of Courage." His gaze hardened. "And your establishment just refused service to 2 American heroes." No one moved. The businessman who had commented earlier stared fixedly at his plate. A waiter froze mid-step, water pitcher still tilted. One of the Rangers held up his phone. "We're issuing an alert about this incident to the Veteran Support Network, approximately 20,000 members statewide, just so they're aware of how veterans are treated here." The manager stepped forward, hands raised placatingly. "There's been a misunderstanding. We had no idea." "That's precisely the problem, sir," Major Hayes interrupted. "You shouldn't need to know someone's service record to treat them with basic dignity. The Americans with Disabilities Act isn't suggestion. The Rangers didn't raise their voices. They didn't demand anything be done. Major Hayes simply placed a framed photograph on the counter. Shadow in full tactical gear with his unit in Iraq, the word brother inscribed at the bottom, before turning to leave. As they departed, diners glimpsed through the window to where Michael and Shadow sat on a park bench across the street. Unaware of what had transpired, the youngest server, a college student who had watched the earlier confrontation in silence, grabbed a takeout container from behind the counter. She quickly filled it with the day's prime rib special, added a slice of apple pie, and hurried outside, crossing to the park bench. She held out the package with a handwritten note tucked under the string. "We were wrong. Please let us make it right." Michael looked at her, then at the restaurant where people now crowded the windows watching. After a moment's hesitation, he accepted the offering with a nod that contained neither forgiveness nor condemnation, just the acknowledgement that amends were being attempted. As the young server walked away, she heard him say to Shadow, "What do you think, buddy? Should we give him another chance?" The dog's tail wagged once, a soldier's measured response to a potential ceasefire. Inside the restaurant, the owner had arrived, having been called by a concerned staff member, a Vietnam-era veteran herself. She listened to the account of what had happened with growing dismay. When she heard about the Ranger's visit, she immediately went to the manager's office, closing the door behind her. 10 minutes later, the manager emerged, removed his badge, and walked out the front door without a word. 1 week later, a new sign appeared in the Oakwood Steakhouse window. "We proudly welcome all veterans and their service animals." Beneath it hung a framed photo of military working dogs throughout American conflicts, from World War II to Iraq and Afghanistan. The local Veterans of Foreign Wars chapter held a small ceremony outside the restaurant, presenting Shadow an honorary medallion inscribed "Four-Legged Warrior," above and beyond. The dog sat at perfect attention throughout the proceedings, breaking position only when Michael gave the release command. Children from a nearby elementary school had made thank you cards for Michael and Shadow. One small boy approached cautiously, looking up at Michael with wide eyes. "Does he understand when people say thank you?" the child asked, pointing to Shadow. Michael knelt down despite his stiff leg. "He doesn't need words," he explained. "He just needs to be beside the people who remember what he's done." The restaurant owner, Margaret Chun, instituted mandatory training for all staff about service animals and the Americans with Disabilities Act. More importantly, she arranged for local veterans to share their stories during monthly community dinners. The college student who had recorded the confrontation approached their table one evening, phone in hand but not recording. "I deleted that video," he said, shifting uncomfortably. "And I want to tell you that my brother just enlisted in the Army. I'd want someone to respect him if he trailed off, unable to complete the thought. Michael simply offered his hand. "Then be that someone now for others." Staff at the steakhouse noticed that whenever Michael and Shadow came in, several customers would quietly pay for their meal anonymously. The corner table where they always sat now bore a small American flag and a plaque reading, "Michael and Shadow, Echo Team, never forgotten." During one lunch, when a car backfired outside, causing Michael's hands to shake violently, Shadow immediately pressed against his leg. The nearby diners pretended not to notice, not out of embarrassment, but from a newfound respect for privacy. Major Hayes' unit deployed again 3 months later. Before leaving, they presented Michael with a unit coin, a rare honor for non-active personnel. Michael kept it in his pocket alongside the photograph, two reminders of brotherhood that transcended time and circumstance. The Oakwood Steakhouse became a gathering place for veterans in the community. On the first Tuesday of each month, they hosted Service Dog Awareness Day, where the public could learn about the vital role these animals play in veterans' lives. The restaurant manager who had confronted Michael found himself unable to secure another position in town. Eventually, he enrolled in a veterans outreach program, working to understand the invisible wounds of war. His journey from ignorance to advocacy became part of the training program Margaret developed for other restaurants in the area. Shadow continued his duties, still alert for signs of Michael's PTSD even in his advancing age. When local schools needed speakers for Veterans Day, Michael and Shadow would visit together, teaching children about service, sacrifice, and the special bond between handlers and their dogs. On quiet evenings, Michael and Shadow could sometimes be found on their porch, watching the sunset. Their shared silence contained volumes. Not everyone in uniform is a hero, but those who stand by their comrades, whether human or canine, embody the best of what service means. If this story moved you, share it as a reminder that respect shouldn't depend on knowing someone's medals or missions. Our veterans and their service animals deserve nothing less than our complete respect.